it was almost like yeah, women were obviously not men, but like
Right.
people that were not white were not men, were not
Exactly.
people. You're saying that it was implemented wrong, and I think Sadie, and what I also believe is like it was implemented perfectly.
Right. That is the feature, not the bug.
Okay.
Ugly,
That's a good way to put it. Well, just coming to rain on my parade.
It's loud, it's chaotic, it's heartbreaking. And it's home. In this episode of Bigger Fish, we take a deep dive into what patriotism in America really means in 2020. Is it something to be protected? Something to be interrogated? Something in between? We'll see. We also talk about Black Lives Matter, the protests in Portland, the real state of the journalism game today, and so much more. So take a deep breath and dive in with us.
I don't know which creeps me out more. The fact that companies are so good at manipulating us, or that people are so easily manipulated. And I don't know, there's a part of me that wants to say that you kind of have to hold us as the public culpable for how much we have allowed to just be run on us. And I'm talking about this in various aspects. Pulling it back to Joe Biden saying that if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, or you don't vote if you have a problem figuring out between me and Trump, you ain't black. What have we done as a people to let this person feel comfortable saying such an outlandish statement? Going into us as consumers, what if we all know this, if we all know what is going on with our data, and the fact that there's probably like the government, or not even the government, some random corporation just has the entire image of what we are written down as just like data in their databases, and they can make predictions based off of that as however they like. And we all know this, but we all just like accept it and just like roll with it. Like, are we not culpable in, is that not like a quiet approval of saying like, all right, sure, you do whatever you want. There's like nothing I can do about it at this moment. So yeah, there you go. Like, obviously it's not good that Joe Biden might feel this way. Obviously it's not good that Facebook has so much influence on our society and our politics and our culture. But I feel like it's too easy to just like let them off, just to let ourselves off the hook and say like, no, these are just fundamentally bad. Obviously, we the public are not bad, but we're just, I don't know, complacent. And when you mix complacency with badness, you're just going to end up with bad still.
Right. I think you're totally right about the complacency, but I guess I focus more on just like the effects of capitalism and how, these huge corporations, they can, spend all that money lobbying, saying, no, we don't want this legislation. Like, this is going to affect us. This is really going to hurt our, our bottom line. And so it's not going to, it's not going to pass. And they're just going to say, hey, they're trying to take your freedom of speech. They want to destroy social media so that you can't use your voice to like, blah, blah, blah.
Just with that, I think you're opening up two different things, right? Capitalism is not an ideology. Okay. Like it is an economic system. Like socialism is not an ideology, it is an economic system. Where you start running into bad things is when you start running into problems is when you start using an economic system as your identity. So we start to conflate Americanism, or perhaps the American ideology, with capitalism. Of course, capitalism is part of it, but a lot more things go into Americanism than just capitalism. Like if you look at the Soviet system, right? Or if you technically in the Soviet Union, socialism was part of the oh my God, I can't talk. Socialism
5 times fast.
Was part of the Soviet system. It was a cornerstone of it. It was like the economic standard of it. But no one is going to sit here and say Denmark and the Soviet Union were the same places, right? They're not going to say Finland and China are the same places. They might have similar standards economically, but you also have to take into account a lot of stuff politically, a lot of stuff culturally, a lot of stuff societally that's making the people like this. So whenever I hear someone just say like, it's capitalism's fault, it's
Okay,
because of failures of the
American capitalism, the power that these corporations have to influence legislators and to say, we don't really like that. That's going to hurt us. That's going to hurt our business. So,
but also the way it affects our culture, because I think that they play together in that.
I think
it's not an indictment of like the grand ideal of free market capitalism. Like we're talking about it as as it works here today.
With that, I think you kind of have to look at just the society that's working in it, right? So you kind of have to like look at your average American, right? The idea is a lot of us are wrapped up in the fading dream, it seems like, of the American dream. Like you work hard, you do your stuff, and you will get by. You will not only will you get by, you will thrive. You will become something great. You will become something excellent. A lot of people tolerate, how do I want to say this? A lot of people tolerate a lot of abuses from private citizens and the control private citizens have on the government, because somehow they feel that the government pushing back on that is in direct opposition to that false American dream, the false idea that anyone can make it no matter what. So then we kind of have to think, okay, when will...
Do we automatically think that, or is that the messaging?
That is the messaging. And I feel like up until recently, people have not really interrogated it. Of course, many people throughout history have looked at the American system and clearly said, all right, there's something wrong here. There's something that's not working here, because it has not worked for so many of its people in so many different ways. But if you look at the average person who buys into the messaging and the propagandizing that a country like ours puts on its people every single day, it's not difficult to expect that they do buy into something like that, and they are super optimistic about something like that. And when you're super optimistic about something like that, sure, it allows for like a super gung-ho, hard-working attitude, but it also invites a fear of maybe some of the economic systems that might do something to correct some of the abuses of free market capitalism as it exists in America. All of that being said, though, I guess I keep just bringing it back to the people. When, sure, someone can be trying to fool you and can be trying to trick you for all of your life, but if you buy into it, like a lot of Americans have, how much blame goes where? How much blame can you put on the average American who like looks around them and says like, yeah, this is the best standard that anyone has ever come up with. This is the best way for us to move forward as a country. And I'm not sure if I'm being clear. I'm kind of like coming up with this as I go and like starting to realize these thoughts right now. But yeah, I don't know. They feel right in this moment.
I think you said a lot.
I tell you, I be long-winded. That is my problem in life.
No, not the long-winded aspect, but like there's a lot of topics that could be touched on. Because like, I guess the main thing that you're coming back to is like, so is it the people's fault that they're being manipulated, or is it the manipulators? And like, who's at fault, right? That's what you're saying?
That comes to the crux of it a lot, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely that's one of the core questions I have.
Right. And for me, it's hard to even consider people being at fault, understanding that like how much power the manipulators have, right? They're not like, we're not being manipulated by Joe Blow, like just someone we can interact with. Like, we're being manipulated by systems and like mega corporations that have the money and that have access to resources to watch us 24/7, right? Like how much, like, we don't have that power as an individual. But like, now if you're trying to say like as a collective, how come we haven't been able to get together and mobilize and fight back? I think again, like, look who's not in control, but who's manipulating us, right? Like, they have a vested interest to keep us separated from one another, from realizing that like, hey, we could do something as a collective, maybe, but yeah. So that's one thought. Then I think another thought that you're having is like the American dream, right? And who buys into it, and what will people do to get the American dream? And I think I've been thinking about this lately, but like, I think America's propaganda is most effective on immigrants, right? And like, thinking back to the jungle and like the book by Upton Sinclair. So right, okay. So in the book, like, there's the message to these Eastern European people that, oh, America's so great, like you can just go and you would be rich and so much better. You get everything you want, you can own land, whatever, blah, 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 right? So these people have no idea that this is straight up propaganda. So they come here, they endure the worst conditions almost imaginable, but like the worst, in order to get to whatever they've been marketing, right? But I think like the longer you stay here and the more you realize how the country works, the less you think the American dream is actually possible. So I feel like if you don't have those connections to the country's past, or if you don't have that knowledge, you're going to tolerate a lot. You're going to justify a whole bunch of wrongdoing and intolerance, and even pitting against people that are in your own interest for something that doesn't even exist.
And also the people who aren't affected. So even if like you were sympathetic to Black Lives Matter, you're like, well, it's not hurting me. So like, I agree with what you're saying, but bro, you were like really angry and that place is on fire. You need to relax. Chill out. Like, go slower.
Yeah. I hear that for sure. But then I start to think about like people who are affected by it. Like, if we're looking at America as a class society as well, you start to think about, you know, your random factory worker or something like that. A person who, when you pull up some of these problems, they'll say like, look, if you don't like America, I don't like how I automatically went into the Southern accent. Hold on. If you don't like America, I'm trying so hard, but it's so easy to like fall into that. If you don't like America, you can leave. And you know, it's a group of people who have bought into the system that this is the best possible way of living, even though it is this exact system of living that has deprived a lot of people of their livelihood just because they were rendered redundant by economics. And the people who might be, and these people might actually be sympathetic to Black Lives Matters, but Black Lives, why can't I talk? Black Lives Matter, but I don't know, maybe it's just the packaging, or maybe it's just that in the actual American ideology that like expands outside of capitalism, like race race baiting is like a very fundamental part of the American experience, right? Pitting people against each other in that way, it's a very important thing to keep the system going as is. So that's something to say about like those people who might be of a lower economic class. And then you get to the people who are like internally inclined to be in favor of Black Lives Matter and who are of like a generally upper to middle economic class, but also look around and say like, I definitely get what you're saying, but you know, please stop burning stuff down. You start to think like, how contrary are their ideals really to America as we understand it, right? Because it's this exact same type of generally middle to upper middle class, predominantly white Democratic voter who has kept in power a party that is like very, very, as we've established, like very, very middle of the road, like not up for like super massive changes at all. Not really up for changing a lot of the stuff that we falsely accept to be just part of the American experience. And if you will refuse to vote against that, or if you will refuse to invite a party that is more centered on like equality for people in a way, then how well did you actually escape the propaganda of America? How well have you actually broken this idea that we're doing stuff well, but we just need like a few tweaks here and there and we'll be golden? Honestly, I feel like I see the point that Upton Sinclair is raising with propaganda being most dangerous to immigrants, but honestly, it feels like the most propaganda is going on with people who have been here for like generations back.
I don't know. Maybe it's a different tactic, right? Like, because I think once you've been here for generations, the like whole American dream thing starts to be like, you know what, that's not true. That's impossible. So like I feel like there's more conditioning that happens once you stay longer that don't necessarily look like the American dream messaging.
In your guys' lives, do you find a lot of people who are pessimistic about not even the politics, nothing that's going on with that, just like their own personal economic future? Because the American dream is an economic dream at its very, very heart. Like, it's not really concerned with politics. It's just like, one day you will be able to live a quality of life that is just white picket fence, 2.5 kids, you'll be golden.
2.5 kids.
That's averages, man. I'm just working with the averages. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I would say most people are optimistic. I feel like.
I don't know, because like I
maybe
don't know
older people not so much.
I don't know if that's the point, right? Because I guess people could think anything, but what the reality is that people don't move between classes that easily, I guess.
So why do we stay? Well, how are we in a position where people realize this? Or I guess it's running under the assumption that people realize it. But if people do realize that we're not moving within classes and things aren't changing up, why are we still here?
Right. And I think that's a part of the system, right? Like, I don't think that's a bug. Like, I think it is to keep us here. Why? I couldn't tell you. I guess it would be like the idea that, oh, well, America's so great and we're the best country on earth and blah, everywhere else we're the freest, whatever, right? That sort of messaging. But like, I feel like that is the point, like to keep us here once we get here and then accept less than favorable conditions.
Mm. Are you guys pretty patriotic in any regard? Like,
I would say I'm.
Would
I don't
I
know
say
how-
if I were patriotic? What was the question? Sorry.
would you guys say you're patriotic in any kind of way?
Would you say you love the country?
I would say maybe back when I was younger. I mean, again, like with military experience, like it's kind of hard not to be patriotic. But I don't know, as I've grown, there's been a lot more questions.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a question. That's a question I'm going back and forth on recently. Just like try to figure out like I really like Americans. Like my best friends are American. There are a lot of really, really cool people in this country. And the country itself and the culture of it, like it's done a lot for me. It's done a lot for my family. It's done a lot to make the people that I love, of course. But then you start to look at it and America as an entity. I don't know. I worry for it quite a bit. I worry about like how sustainable it is, and it's in moments like what's going on in a lot of places throughout the country right now. Like I didn't know that it was still so intense out in the streets, but just recently in Chicago, there were like major skirmishes, like major fights between protesters and police. And in one of the main parts of Chicago, one of the main parks of Chicago, they had a statue of Christopher Columbus, and protesters tried to tear it down. Police came, there was tear gas, there were rubber bullets, the whole works. And Donald Trump got on TV saying like, federal troops will be dispatched to the city in order to secure law and order. And this was really scary to a lot of people because right now in Portland, federal troops are already there dealing with a lot of the protests. And like some of the videos coming out of that situation have just been so scary. Like just fully armed troops going through. They were throwing some protesters in the back of vans and just driving away.
It wasn't like like a military van. It was literally just like it looked like a
random unmarked van, just random white unmarked van. And a lot of these people, no one sees anything. No one sees them anymore. Not yet, anyway. So now we start to think about what is this the American way? Is this what Americanism looks like right now?
That's the Trump way. That's what Trump wanted. This is what he wanted the whole fucking time. Like he wanted to be a dictator. That's why he's hanging out with like Netanyahu and Putin. That's why he wants to, that's why he wants to be one of those guys who just like, can just be like, I want to hold up the Bible in front of the church and like, just like send in the troops and just make way for me. Like that's what he wants to do. He wants to be like the dictator. He wants to be the king. He doesn't want to be the president of America. He wants to be the king of America. He wants to be able to say whatever the hell he wants, do whatever the hell he wants. But I think this is going to be my hot take of the day. I think that probably a lot of liberals would maybe feel uncomfortable with saying they love the country. And I think we tend to do that. This just occurred to me like 10 seconds ago. But it's because we associate that with certain people who espouse these sometimes really horrific values, who espouse like the most racist and misogynistic, archaic, hurtful ideas that they can come up with. And then they also, in like the same breath, will say, you have to be a God-fearing American and like love this country. So we associate those things that it all kind of like connotes. It's like the other stuff. But I think the fact that you have these people protesting and wanting to make these things better, I think it's because a lot of it is because it hurts them. But there's people who are out there who it's not hurting them. And I think they're doing it because they want to make it better. And I think seeing people not being indifferent means that they do love it and they do care about it. I mean, I don't think you would like be willing to get hurt and like, endure that much suffering if you didn't care about it. So I don't know if you want to call it love, but I think it is definitely caring about the country and wanting to see it better. I think the way that I tend to feel is that, like you were saying, I feel really worried about this country and all the state of it. And so I think you were kind of saying that as if it's, contradicting the idea that you could love the country, but I don't think they're in any way contradictory. I think they're not exclusive in any way. I think you could totally love somebody who is like, hurting themselves and hurting others and still care for them and still want to give. I think this is like an idea that I've had, that part of the reason that, we think of patriots as loving the country is because that's part of just like the message that's supposed to be told, that like, that's why you're doing this, because you love this country. But this is another Ezra Klein podcast quote. But I think love is giving. And I think a lot of people in the military have given so much to the country. Like, just think about like a parent, and you're just giving and giving and giving. And I think that's what causes that love. Just that intense giving. And I think a lot more people care about this country, and I would say love this country, than are willing to admit, because it tends to connote something else that they don't want to be associated with.
100% agree with the sentiment. That just feels fundamentally true. Like, people out there like protesting like belligerent state power and like police repression. Like, what's more American than that? Than just like being out there and wanting to exercise your rights, wanting to exercise your rights to assembly, to speech, to like hopefully try to interact with in a political way in order to like move your country more towards equity and like trying to make the country better for all of its citizens. Like that is like true Americanism. And honestly, I would like I feel like a lot of politicians like cede a lot of really good political ground by leaving patriotism and religion as well, patriotism and religion to the radical right. Like, this is not something that Republicans should have a monopoly over, just because these are not ideas that a lot of people who are espousing allegiance to the Republican Party are necessarily holding up in the best kind of way. I hope sometime in the future people come to realize it. Like, we really do love this country, and every time like someone like Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity comes out and like says something to in opposition to that fact, like it's just another bold-faced lie. One that really needs to be corrected soon.
Glenn Beck going, I really love my country. Yeah. And just like, it's like these people, they just want to destroy America. And like, I don't know, like we're talking about like, the culpability of, people listening to propaganda. Like, I don't know, I feel like almost we began to believe that. They told us we hated it. So we're like, yeah, fuck this country.
Mm.
Like, I could say fuck you and still like love you.
You'd have to get some like really, really precise tone on that. But yeah, I take your point. That is true. It's definitely possible. We're emotionally advanced people. You can see something wrong with something and still love it. Like, things are flawed. People are flawed. And we love despite those flaws.
I think, okay, I don't know. I don't know how much of it is love and how much of it is like trauma. Like what are we gonna do? What else do we know to do? We've been stuck here. Accepting and like to say that it's American to be out on the street to fight for your right to be alive, like the whole premise is wrong because America then is set to not recognize people's right to live, right? You know, like that's terrifying, right?
Truly,
Like it's normal for us to be out on the streets to be like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have to die before we go to the hospital because we can't pay. Like something's wrong.
Most definitely.
I would wager to say that it's like thinking you're in love with an abuser or like feeling some sort of connection, but like I don't know if it's I don't know if it's pure love. I just think we're just accepting stuff.
I think when I say love America, for me personally, I mean the general idea of America, right? I love the fact, I love the freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, for example. I love...
But for who? Like,
exactly. And of course you can like start to think about things, and you have to start thinking about things practically. Like, I was just thinking about this recently, the history of Christianity, just with like, once again, parents, immigrants from Ghana. You start to think like, all right, how did you guys end up with this religion? Like, oh my God, it came through like colonialism and exploitation. And you know, that offers like that offers a really, really messed up view of the religion generally. You stop to think of it as religion, and you start to think of it as like a tool of exploitation. And it doesn't do much for faith, we'll say that. But then you look at the thing in and of itself. Like how, like some of the ideas enshrined with the faith in the best of ways. Not pointing out, not using Christianity in a hateful way that a lot of people do, but just like looking at it at the pure heart of it, and the pure center of it that a lot of people choose to look at it from, like its position on love, its position on just pure acceptance and radically challenging unjust power for the sake of justice and for the sake of security for the poorest and weakest members of society. Like, that is what true faith is. And in a similar way, you can look at America on its face and say like, oh, this is a really messed up system. This is clearly not working in practice, these grand ideas that you have thought of. But I find it hard to like, I guess it's hard not to love like the better face of those ideas. Perhaps it comes back to what I said before. I really, really do love Americans. I do love the way that, I do love the fact that many people have internalized these great ideals and like used them to say like, all right, this is what we should be fighting for. This is what we should be agitating for. Goddamn woman. This is like what we have to be. And I hate the fact that America as a state, as a political system, has made it so hard for people to actually realize those facts. But the ideas, like, it's complex. Like the ideas and what America purports to be, like that is an image that I can definitely fall in love with. even if it's not something that is on the ground right now, even if it's not something that we're living up to, I have hope that somewhere deep down, somehow, with like enough education and with like just enough realization of what we are supposed to be, we can find our way there. America is the place that came up with a lot of these really innovative ideas for its time. Like at the back end of the 1700s, what the founding fathers were writing was something that had never been seen in quite the same way in all of human history up until that point. And obviously they didn't do the best job implementing it. That's actually an understatement. They did a horrible job implementing it for its people, but it still stands that they had the ideas, and those ideas somewhat shape the minds of the people now. And I love the fact that we are shaped by at least the thought of what things should be. And hopefully that'll help us get to the place where things could be.
Yeah, interesting. I guess now that you say that, like the founding fathers did a horrible job of implementation. Like, I wonder if that's true if we look at white men with land. Like maybe it was fine for them, but for anyone that wasn't in that group of people, sucked.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean by a horrible job of implementation. Like, they, in the same breath, they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. At the same time, a very good majority of the men were actual slaves. Like, there's no way to get around it. There's no way to get around the fact that genocide against Native Americans was a very real part of American foreign policy. There's no way to get around the fact that women couldn't vote until, like, 1920 or something like that. Like, the implementation was just really...
No, I'm saying, like, I'm kind of agreeing with you, but like at the same time I'm saying, like, for them, men equaled white men with land.
Men, like, it was almost like yeah, women were obviously not men, but like people that were not white were not men, were not people.
Exactly.
And I think what Sadie's also trying to say, or what I'm hearing from both of you guys, is like, you're saying that it was implemented wrong, and I think Sadie, and what I also believe is like, it was implemented perfectly.
Right. That is the feature, not the bug.
Okay.
Ugly, ain't it?
Well, just coming to rain on my parade.
Yeah, I see. From its implementation, America was not for people who look like us. Like, that's just a fact of history, for sure. Then I guess, what do you do with knowledge like that? Like, what do you... Can the definition of America be expanded then? Like, it should be, I suppose, but can it? Oh, no.
I don't know. I guess I guess when I think about, like, being patriotic, I don't spend too much time thinking about, like, you know, George Washington and shit. Like, I don't know. Fuck it. Like, what? I don't know. I just think about the people that I know in this country. I think about, like, us being able to do this. And I think all, you know, my family that lives here, and, like, all the culture that comes out of it. And, like, yeah, I think about it like in its, like, contemporary, you know, state. And what we aspire to today. But yes, I do agree that I agree with that point, that, like, that wasn't a bug, that was the point.
Right. And then I think, Dom, you were making, like, the comparison to religion, right? Like, like, religion, we'll say Christianity, has, like, all these ideals, right, that appeal to our morals, right? And America has all these ideals that appeal to our morals. But then at the same time, both Christianity and America are weaponized. Weaponized are like are a part of harm for a lot of people. Like, how do you reconcile liking the ideals but not necessarily endorsing what's happening with some Christians or with American leadership?
Yeah, trying to bridge that gap between theory and practice in a big way. And you can really, really hate the practice, but I wonder if, like, the practice necessarily should be used to condemn the ideas. And that's something I'm going back and forth on a lot.
I guess, okay, here's the problem I have with this is when people conflate the government with the country. So if we're talking about, like saying fuck China, I'm not talking about the people. I think people conflate the country with the government and not with the people. So when you're saying I hate China, you're talking about Xi Jinping and what his government is doing. And the thing is yeah, they're hurting American businesses and stealing American intellectual property. But like, I don't know, I think they might be hurting the Chinese people even more. And I'm not saying I hate those people. I'm not saying I hate the people who work in the sweatshops. But like, I guess when I'm thinking of like loving the country, I'm not thinking about like I love Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and Pelosi. Like I'm thinking about like, I don't know, I love all those people that are angry at them and have good reason to be angry at them and who, are going to go out and, be stupid and vote for this person or that person, but they do, and they want to throw a wrench in the system and blow the whole thing up. But I think there's a difference. I don't know. I guess that kind of bothers me sometimes, like conflating the government with the public.
I see what you're saying with that. The thing is, when you have to ask the question then, like, who are you saying you love when you say you love America? Because you bring up the case of China, perfect example. You can make the distinction between the Chinese people and the Chinese government in a pretty dramatic way. Like, the Chinese people don't choose their government. But then you have to come to America and say, like, on its face at least, the American people do choose their government. The American people have chosen to have people like Pelosi and McConnell and Chuck Schumer in power for however many decades that they've been in power. So then it begs the question, like, okay, if we're not conflating the people with the government, like what are we really focusing in on when we say we love America? Is it possible to like divorce the government from that statement then, if the people are choosing the government?
I guess I would push back and say, how much of the time are we choosing those people?
Every 2 years for the House and every 4 years for the Senate, I guess.
But then you have people that can't even vote. Like if you have a felony, you're homeless if you can't afford
That's
ID.
true.
If you're working that hour,
Thank you.
Literally, if you're just busy that day, that one day.
Right. Voting is not mandatory.
And yeah, how many of those votes weren't necessarily representative of what people actually wanted?
That too.
Like how many of it, how much of the time was it, yes, some in whatever way, the public was manipulated so that those people could stay in power. They said one thing, but then they totally, did a whole other thing. And it wasn't, reflective of what we wanted. But they were the bastards who were willing to take the power.
Mm.
But then I think that heightens your question even more because, like, do we know the people? Like, do we know this country if we're only looking at who's in power?
Not at all. Like, I would hope not, because if you look at who's in power, you get a pretty bad view of the country. Yeah, I don't know. I keep coming back to the feeling of, really, I have no choice but to agree with the fact that you have to love you have to love the people in some regard, because if you just look at the government, like, I don't understand. There's no people who are like actively in favor of the American government right now. I think like just the way it functions, the way it looks right now, people are not happy at all with it.
I don't know. I think that it's kind of like maybe if we're thinking about like this idea that maybe conservatives have painted and this like respect for authority and all these things that we come to associate with like patriotism. But like I don't know what the definition is. But I'm just thinking about like it meaning loving your country. That's like the working definition I'm going off of.
Mhm.
Like I don't know. I don't think you have to love the politicians. Like just because you don't love them doesn't mean you don't love the country. It's like whoa, you gotta check all these boxes off.
Yeah.
You mark this one, so therefore you don't qualify. It's like no,
Yeah.
I can love it however I want.
For sure. You gotta find a more abstract way of talking about it. Like that's the most important thing overall. Like just more nuance in the conversation. Trying to figure out like, okay, what are the things you actually love about it versus what are the things that go with the stuff that you love, but you actively have to try and change. That's a different conversation though. One that we really, really need in America right now, as evidenced by what we see just going on day by day. And hopefully we start moving towards that conversation. I'd like to think that nationally people are starting to have those kind of thoughts and starting to figure out how important those kinds of conversations are. But we will see. We'll see.
Interesting. Because it kind of sounds like coming from a place of love. I say that very hesitantly. Means that like there's a level of inherent acceptance. Because
No.
like
I think you could love a family member and see them destroying themselves, and you're not accepting that. Like you're gonna get angry at them. You're gonna tell them to do something. You're gonna force them to like. You're gonna try and do everything in your power to help them, and that doesn't mean you're. Does that mean you're accepting them? I guess you're accepting them as they are, but like you're trying to get them to a different place. You want them to be better, whatever that means.
And then I guess, because like if we're gonna go off of that example, I'm thinking of like, what if it instead of loving to see them change, what if it means just cutting off all contact and like not having that in your life? So like if I go back to like the country, like so what if it just means if I have to say like, oh yeah, I love XYZ, then it kind of seems like nothing is going to change. Like I would actually rather see nothing be the same than say, yeah, I love this part, and if we just change that little aspect, then everything would be fine for me. That's how I'm hearing it. I don't know if that's how you're meaning it.
No.
So how do you mean it?
Right.
Well,
because it doesn't sound like that there's an option to just be like, no.
What might be necessary here is like the acknowledgement that we're trying to ascribe very concrete feelings to a very inconcrete entity. Like, what is America really? Like, America didn't exist on any map like 500 years ago. It's like, it's not a thing. It's not like a thing like a family member, for example. It's not like a tangible thing that you can interact with. It's a lot of different ideas that each person is bringing into it day by day. So perhaps that might be a more precise statement for me personally. I don't know what America is, but I do know that I do know the ideals that America says it is. And I do love those ideals quite a bit. In practice, I don't actually know what aspect of America we're really grabbing onto. So it's not super easy to say I love that, like that imprecise thing, I guess. That that feels a little bit more true to me as I start thinking through it. And more of like, I just love Americans. I love our culture. I love a lot of parts of our culture. I love a lot of parts of our philosophies. That's what America means to me, and I guess I that's what I focus on when I say I love. That's what I mean when I say I love America, like those specific nuances.
I think like my family immigrated here before I was born, so I'm the only American in my nuclear family, and that like that title has always been like ingrained in me. It's like, you're American, which always bothered me because I never felt like, in my nuclear family at least, it was something that we could all relate to. Even though we were all living in America, it still felt like there was something that I should be grateful for. And if I'm not, then if I'm not taking every opportunity, everything that America gives to you, it meant that I was ungrateful, or that I didn't, that maybe I couldn't live up to that standard of what an American is. But I also am not Peruvian. So then it's like this weird, like, in between, that I felt like when I was younger, I was really resentful of what being an American was, because I didn't know what that was. You know, like, even though I knew that's what I was, it didn't really make sense to me. And as I get older, I think it still doesn't make sense in terms of like it being part of my identity. But I know that there are things to be grateful for, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I would die for my country, or that I would even stick up for it, really.
As is, like, uh, that's a hard question to ask now. Like, you just brought a whole different aspect of life and death into it. Like, it's easy to say, like, you love the place, but will you love it so much you will die for it? Like, that's an interesting question. It was a question I was thinking a lot about in January, when like all of these memes were going around, like, oh my God, we're gonna invade Iran, it's gonna be horrible, da 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 da. Look at me, like, going to the memes before I go to the news. Well, there was like actual concern that we were going to invade Iran, and it was like super scary. And I was like looking at the selective enrollment card that I have in my house, and Elias has one too. Just like, if it goes really, really, really left, the United States government retains the right to like draft us into the military. And like, what does that mean for us? And are we? Then I had to start thinking about, like, all right, am I prepared to go abroad and fight for America? But then it starts coming back to what we've kind of been referencing this whole time. What aspect of America are we worried about? Like, are we worried about like the imperialistic part of America that's been a big part of our foreign policy for a long time? Like, for that, I don't think I know I can't support. If it ends up that like someone's invading New York or something, and like they're like actively trying to invade the U.S., then sure, that's a worthwhile cause. Like, protecting the ideas of, or protecting the causes that we, protecting like the philosophies and the potential that we have. But right now, like, yeah, there are different parts of America to fight for. There are definitely different parts of America to say that I believe in this enough that I would give my life for it. And it's not all parts of the country at all. And trying to figure out what it is that we will actually fight for in America. That's like a part of our national conversation now. Something to figure out, because no one really knows what the America we're fighting for is. No one knows what we are as Americans. What does that mean? What kind of responsibilities does that come with? It's a big question. It's a really, really big question.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing is like there's like maybe a more structured way to defend or fight for America, or to die for America, kind of like, I guess, in the military sense. But then there's also, I guess, what I think you're saying is like maybe on like another level, and like fighting for another side that isn't so much for our government. Is that what you mean? Like more for people? But I think that goes with what Sadie's saying in like the fact that we even have to consider this.
Mm.
But I don't know. I feel like how much of that definition is just, was written by somebody else.
Definition of what?
Loving the country and being willing to sacrifice for it. Like just think about like what went into like, saying you have to die for your country. Like, why would that messaging ever have been created or written? Because we had to like send somebody to go die.
Yeah.
Well, we had to send somebody to go die for something that was like, who was probably going to benefit. I don't know. There's a good chance it wasn't, the people who were putting their lives on the line.
Yeah. And not even their families. Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying we're buying into that definition of sacrificing for your country. And that's not necessarily I don't think that's the only way that you can sacrifice for your country. Say a journalist who says that, they could. So as a journalist, you might be in this bind where, you have a source who tells you some, leaks some information to you, and they want to remain anonymous. And then the government says you have to tell us the identity of your source. And if you tell the identity of your source, then you're going to be sued by them for, breach of contract. And if the government subpoenas you and you refuse to, identify your source, then you're going to go to jail. And you say, "No, what? I agree with what that person said. They were trying to do something to make this country better. So, know what? Fuck it. I'm going to jail." That's sacrificing for your country, because you're saying this thing is making the country better. And it's literally your government that is hurting you, but you're doing it in the public interest. That's literally, you're sacrificing, and you could die in jail. What if you get a life sentence and you spend your whole life in jail? You can't not say that's sacrifice, and you can't not say you're doing that in conflict with the government, and you're doing it for the interest of the public. And I think that speaks to, I don't know, serving the public interest. Is that not, a love for them?
I think so. I'm wondering why that even is like the case. Like the fact that it needs to be done that way is kind of like, because I don't think that there's like, I don't think I'm trying to say that like sacrificing yourself for the country means that you're on this bad side. I think the fact that that's even possible is like why would the government want you to go against the people, right?
Because the government because the government's interest is not the public's interest.
Right. And what is a government supposed to be?
It's supposed to serve the public, but we clearly,
yeah,
but we clearly haven't figured that system out.
I don't know.
It's a shit system.
If that's what it is, that we haven't figured it out, or if it's made for us to not change it. And then I think what you're trying to say, Jenny, is like, if the country is the government, then no, I don't think I love the country, or I would want somebody to sacrifice for the country, because it's the government, right? And the government doesn't act in the interest of the people, right? So if the country equated to the people and equality, I don't know. individuals and having their right to be, then yes, I would love the country and work towards those ideals. But that doesn't seem to be the case when it possibly could be or when it should be.
And I think when it comes to patriotism, I have a problem with that word just in general, because I think, like, when you mentioned, like, you know, I don't hate China. Like, I'm fine with their people. I also think, like I like people. I like humans, American or not. You know, like, people are great. I think there's some really shitty people, but I really wouldn't even blame them for being that shitty. I'm just like, that is what you were conditioned to do. That is what you, I guess, believe you are. And I can't bring it upon myself to try to change someone. But I also think that when these, like, words are, hey, he's so cute. When these words are kind of like,
close the door.
like, we're almost like given these, like if you're a patriot, like, that was something that they try to sell, right? Like, if you're a patriot to this country, you can come, sure. Do you know this about the country? Do you know about, like, it became this thing where you had to prove your love to even be here. So to me, it feels like you can't be American if you don't believe that. And that's not, I don't think that's true for me. I don't think that's true for many people. Like, I could still be American and be like, this is not good.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the definition of what American was a patriot. So I think that word is just, sometimes it's too much.
Fuck that definition. That's a bullshit definition.
Well,
That's written by some fucking assholes who wore stupid white hats and have stupid fucking flags. Fuck those people.
So then, what should we say the definition is then? What's the definition of patriot then, Elliot?
Yeah, I'm curious too.
I think loving the public, wanting to give to the public, being willing to sacrifice for them.
Being a humanist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder how much of a focus being a patriot is in this country versus other countries. Like, is this an American thing to, like, condition us to accept stuff, or, like, do other countries do something similarly and as intensely?
I think probably people everywhere love their country. I think it's just in this country we associate it with, like, white dudes who, like, are really obnoxious and, like, you know, I don't know. We don't associate. I think as liberals we tend not to associate it with, like, the best aspects of society, the things that we, like, admire about the country.
And I think that's a definite trait globally. Like, just like looking at some of the countries that I've been in, it's always been the more conservative, the more maybe restrictive parts of society that, like, lay hold on this, like, super gung-ho patriotism or even nationalism. And it's always people who are generally on the left side of the aisle who are more like, you know, people are good people all over the place. I don't think we're anything particularly special. We're just, like, trying to be good people all over the place. I think that's part of what I'm hearing you say right now, Jenny. Like, to be a good American is basically just be a good person. And, like, no country has a monopoly on good personness. And I agree. I definitely agree with the sentiment. I guess the only nuance that I add to it is that there is an how do I even say? There's, like, an American ideal that, like, there's, like, a little sprinkle of something we do different in our good and our general way of being a good person, and like the way, like the cultural nuance of being a good person in China and the cultural nuance of being a good person in America, like 95% of the things are probably going to be the same, and like that little 5% is just like local flavor that you put on. I guess it's that 5% that I love if we're talking about like being patriotic or whatever word we want to put in. Like, I just like the cultural nuances of America a lot of the time. Like, coming back to the same thing, the ideals that we ascribe to, even if the government, once again, like taking the government all the way out of it, taking the messed up ways that we have failed those ideals out of it, just like focusing on the ideals and the principles themselves and how they manifest within our imagination. I guess that's what I've come to love, and that's what I've come to appreciate. Keeping in mind that people are good people all over the place. Like, it's not anything super duper special, but it's special enough that it feels like, yeah, this is my thing. This is
It's home.
It's home, exactly.
Yeah. I totally feel that. Like, if you go abroad, right, like, and someone talks shit about Americans, as they always do, you're kind of like, excuse me, like, it's still me, you know?
Exactly.
It's still a part of me. I grew up here. I am American, and I think that's what is so complicated about it, is that it could go in so many different directions, like the relationship that you have with your country.
Yeah, most definitely.
I think that was really good. Do you want to cut it there? Because we'll just keep going on and on. We have 6 minutes.
I mean,
left
I was
in this
about to
recording.
start pissing on the French, like when I was studying abroad there, and when they made
Fuck
fun of
the
America.
French.
Honestly,
I hope Roderick doesn't hear this.
Who doesn't hear it?
My friend who's French.
Okay.
If you do hear this, fuck you, Roderick.
I think I'm all good. If anyone else has anything to add, or are we solid? So let's call it a sign off.